Greetings adventurers, this is Craddock, and in this video we're going to be going over some starter builds for the DMO set. Season 14 Hadrix for Wizard brings the Delcier Magnum Opus to the forefront. Having a couple of builds in your pocket will be quite nice when getting that 6-piece bonus in season. So going to go over 3 different builds. Going to go over a Frozen Orb variant that is a non-channeling build. We're going to go over an Explosive Blast build that is a channeling variant, and then we're going to go over a Twister channeling build. The Frozen Orb tends to be T13 capable, but I felt more efficient at T12 on that one. For the Explosive Blast, definitely capable of doing T13, but at a slower clear for that particular build. And then on the Twister, felt capable of doing T11, possibly T12, so a little bit weaker on that one, but still capable of getting you going in season, letting you farm items so you can get to a proper, probably Taurasha based farming build. So before we dive in, I just want to remind you that these are starter builds. I tried to build them in such a way that they only require a base combination of minimum items, and there are some other items included in the build that enhance it, but may not be necessary to get off the ground with said build. I tried to build them also in such a way that they included less bounty items, but certain builds did include bounty items. So just keep in mind that some of these items are optional, and also that these builds aren't tailored or tuned to be like the fastest T13 farming build ever as far as that is concerned. They're just meant to get you transitioned off of the set as quickly as possible and as comfortably as possible. That being said, DMO is a very strong set and is good for greater rifting, leveling gems, farming Paragon, at least solo. So I've included a couple of builds links in the description as well, and those will be DMO based GR farming builds that I've previously put out and featured. Alright, so here is the DMO Frozen Orb starter build that I've put together for T11, or I actually did T12 run in a very quick amount of time, so, and I'm still at only 500k DPS here, so quite nice. This particular setup does not require the Ring of Grandeur, also a plus. We're using the Aetherwalker for mobility. It's a non-channeling build, so we're using the Triumvirate with the Unstable Scepter. Triumvirate giving us that extra damage when we cast our signature spells, up to 3 times, and then we have the Unstable Scepter giving that multiplier and the double explosion. Another fairly required item for the build is the Shaman Delcier. You're going to want to wear this item. Hopefully you've come by a Leorg's Crown at this point and should be able to cube it to have it use in this build. We're also using a couple of rings for utility. Some of these aren't required, it's just they help out a lot. I would say the most required is the Halo of Carini, just to give that extra layer of defense. The most sought after of the 3 rings, I would say. After that, you probably want, these are probably equal, but I like the Avarice Band for this build to scoop up those orbs a lot easier, since it is a little bit more time sensitive as far as setting up the bubble and getting on to the next elite pack to keep progression going. We have the Stone of Jordan here. Works very well actually with this particular build. to increase the damage, and we have room for it too, so which is quite different from the Taurasha build, which requires Ring Aurora Grandeur. So we have room for it in this build, and it's there, and it's helping us deal damage to elites. It's awesome. Again, as with the other build, you can use whatever amulet you have on hand. Let's see here. For skills, we have Astral Presence for that increased resource regen. We're also running a couple of different skills. Teleport for the mobility, of course, but Calamity is helping us stun those enemies to allow us to set up the slow time and engage them without taking too much damage in that interim while we're setting up for an attack. Cool thing about this build, we're using the Bane of the Powerful instead of Zay's Stone of Vengeance. This should help out earlier in season, since we won't be able to level the Zay's Stone of Vengeance as much. Just getting a level 25 Bane of the Powerful should be stronger even than a, level 50 Zay's Stone of Vengeance. Plus, it removes the range requirement from the build to some extent, so it's just a little bit smoother as far as earlier in season. That's why I went for this option. Again, we're going for Boon of the Hoarder for that gold and extra movement speed, just to get that gold earlier in season is quite nice. And then Bane of the Trapped. If you don't know, when you cast Frozen Orb will chill enemies before it deals damage to them. So even if Frozen Orb is hitting enemies farther away, it will still have a crowd controlling impairing effect on them when it deals damage, and it will benefit. Frozen Orb will benefit from trapped at range. It's just something to keep in mind. Let's see. Okay, Power of the Storm, reducing those costs of spells. Let's see, Deflection for the extra shielding. Note that when you cast Teleport, you will gain a deflection stack, so you're getting shielding even as you're on the move, which is quite nice. Frozen Orb for the huge damage rune here. Shock Pulse is mostly here for the proc rate on this skill. It will give you more returns via Arcane Power on crits, so it's nice to have, in my opinion. Anyway, that's an overview of the build. The reason I'm going Blur here is because it felt kind of squishy, and there was a lot of damage already included with the items that are in the build, so I opted for Blur over Power Hungry. Also because the build itself is a little bit smoother. Being more of an up-close build, Blur just seems to fit a little bit better than Power Hungry, in my opinion, for this setup, at least for T12. Yeah, Unstable Anomaly for the second life, and we have Time Warp for the additive damage here. You can swap this rune out for whatever you choose. I just have been preferring the Time Warp here. And yeah, that's about it. As for affixes on gear, you're going to want at least one resource cost reduction roll. I recommend this on shoulder, but having two is a huge benefit. I do recommend getting two, and you can put the second one either on your weapon, as I have here, or you can put it on the source in place of, I've got Arcane Orb damage, you would put resource cost reduction there. As far as other rolls, you're going to want attack speed on your gloves and both of your rings. That will be desirable. Cold, my amulet of course is not, I tried to get the worst amulet I have just so I would reduce the damage of the build. It was kind of hard to do that, so had to wear this amulet, but you definitely want cold damage on your bracer and your amulet with crit, so it's standard stats. I'll post them on the written guide as well. And that's about it as far as this particular build goes. I felt the Leorics fit a little bit better because while you do have the shielding, and you could potentially go with the Pride's Fall. Number one, Pride's Fall is a bounty item, so it would require an extra farming session as far as bounties are concerned. And number two, it still seemed to drop quite a bit with taking more damage with this particular setup. So I tended to favor the ease of cubing the Leoric's Crown, since you will have that already as you've leveled up. Pretty cool. Very fast setup. Hope you enjoyed this one. And so this is the DMO 6 Explosive Blast build starter version. Very exciting, this build, and very powerful. I was able to do T13 right out of the box with my 450k meager, you know, slimmed down 100 Paragon setup, so I'm very excited about that. I was able to squeak out a 3-minute and 30-second run on T13, but most runs felt like more like 4 minutes, so it will be a slower clear, but you can go a little bit higher than some of the other starter setups, which is the advantage to this build. You will move slower though, specifically because we are including 3 multipliers. We're including the Death Wish, the Wand of Woe, which gives those extra blasts as well, and then the Etched Sigil, which also casts the spinner when you channel it. So this is what it looks like when you both channel and cast the Explosive Blast. It's like a machine gun effect. It's just a lot of damage coming out when you include those 3 multipliers. So the idea here though is that we get all our damage from all of these multipliers, and then we have to find some way to include a lot of movement in the build to make up for the fact that we can't include a mobility weapon, mobility-based weapon in the build. I went with channeling specifically because the non-channeling version of Explosive Blast felt a little bit weak in my opinion. So a couple of other multipliers here and damage skills. We're using Bane of the Trapped, Bane of the Powerful for the extra damage, elite damage, and elite damage reduction. And then we're also using Audacity since it is a melee build. We're going to use a lot of movement in this build. So we're using Teleport with Wormholes for that double jump and just getting us as far as possible, as quick as possible. Illusionist for the extra movement speed when we cast our slow time or our teleport. Quite nice to include this in the build. Sleek Shell, Diamond Skin. This is a cooldown based build, so this is on a fairly low cooldown and will be up fairly often, especially considering we are including the Obsidian Ring of the Zodiac to help reduce our cooldowns randomly. That will also help reduce the cooldown on Diamond Skin and Teleport, increasing mobility, which is quite nice. Another skill here, we're using the Storm Armor with the Scramble Rune, which gives 25% movement speed when we take damage. This is quite nice, especially for right after you kill an elite, because the orbs will go everywhere. We don't really have a lot of pickup radius in this build base, so having this little bursts of movement right after we kill that elite pack to help scoop up the orbs and get away from all the danger can be quite nice. The channeling spinner in this build is Ray of Frost, Cold Blood. Cold Blood reducing the channeling cost of Ray of Frost in combination with the Hergbrush's binding. Typically you'll put this in the cube, I think, if you're using the gold wrap, but this allows you to run a rune other than Power of the Storm on the Storm Armor, which is quite nice. So that's why that's how we're kind of balancing the resource in this build. Of course, you're also going to want that APOC on source. Just keep that in mind. Let's see, other mobility we have in the build. We have the Boon of the Hoarder, of course, while we're picking up that gold. And this kind of ties into some of the defense of the build where you're using the gold wrap. So when you pick up the gold, you get an insane armor boost, which makes you basically invulnerable while you're picking up gold, which is quite nice. It lets you tank those molten explosions, pick up items at your leisure, basically. So it's quite nice as a defensive mechanism here. We're also including the Halo of Carini. I'd say the core items to the build, to the bare minimum you'll need to make it work, is going to be the Death Wish, the Wand of Woe, the Etched Sigil, the Hergbrush's binding, and the Halo of Carini. You could probably do T11 and T12 with just those items and the set. That's excluding the Endless Walk, the Gold Wrap, the Zodiac, If you didn't happen to not get those, you could probably still do at least T11 with this build, which is quite nice. It's very scalable. And then, yeah, it's pretty good. As far as the rune on Slow Time, I kind of felt like the build had a lot of damage already in other places, so I wanted to go with Exhaustion here just to give us a little bit of more defensive buffer. The shielding from Diamond Skin also helps in this regard, giving us a little bit of sustain, recovery, that sort of thing. We're running Unstable Anomaly for the second life, Evocation for the cooldown, and yeah, it's a very smooth setup in my opinion. There are a few alternate items here. If you happen to find these or want to use these, they worked fairly well, but I just didn't feel they were the best for the build. The Illusory Boots worked really well at allowing you to position at ease and just not having to avoid bumping into enemies, that sort of thing. But these are a bounty item, and I kind of wanted to exclude as many bounty items as possible. The Warzekian Arm Guards giving a huge burst of speed when you wreck items. Unfortunately, I did not want to include the Wreath of Lightning, and with the small attack radius of Explosive Blast, became problematic proccing the Warzekian Arm Guards at a regular interval. An alternate skill you can use here, which will reduce the movement speed of the build significantly, is you can opt to put in Black Hole instead of Diamond Skin. Black Hole Supermassive will give you that huge radius for the pull, or you could use Spell Steal for the increased damage, and this is kind of what that would look like if you're just channeling and casting. You get that nice pull in those ranged elites a little bit easier. It will slow the build down as far as movement is concerned though, so I ended up preferring the Sleek Shell, so just keep that. Let's go over the affixes real quick. You're going to want a lot of cooldown in this build. Having at least 50% would be great, but you can probably manage it as low as 45, but again, 50% would be what you're going to want to shoot for with this setup. Try and get cooldown on shoulders, gloves, both rings. Again, I'm simulating cooldown on ring with this amulet. That's kind of a dud amulet, trying to reduce my damage there. Weapon and source for cooldown as well. And then you're going to want the diamond in the helmet, and as much as you can into Paragon at this point. I don't know how many Paragon points you will have, but try and put it into cooldown first. So yeah, that's the general idea for the build. Get as much resource as you can as well with Paragon. And yeah. Anyways, hope you like the setup. I've been enjoying it, and yeah. Alright, so this is the T11 DMO Twister build. It's kind of like a starter T11 build that you would use to transition into a Tal Rasha build, but main items here that you're going to need, required items, you're going to need the Twisted Sword, which stacks up a multiplier up to 5 times as you cast more energy Twister. You're going to need the Aetherwalker for mobility. You're going to need the Etch Sigil for that multiplier while channeling. You're going to need the Mantle of Channeling for increased damage and defense while channeling. You're going to need the Rancelor's Folly Bracers, and the Herg Brash's Binding Belt for resource reduction. Those are the required items, I would say, for the build. Even without the Hail of Carini, some of the rings, or the Nemesis Bracers, you can still do T9, T10, I would think, fairly efficiently with this build, even without those. But having these additional items, such as Hail of Carini for the extra defense, having, oh, and I forgot to mention, Ring of Royal Grandeur is required with the setup, so, well, it's not required. If you don't have the Nemesis bracers, you will of course cube the Mantle of Channeling, but if you are able to spend the time and acquire a Ring of Royal Grandeur, you will then be able to cube the Ransler's Folly or the Nemesis bracers and wear both of those, or have both of those bracer effects available while wearing the Mantle of Channeling. So that's the main reason the Ring of Royal Grandeur is required. I am using a very middle of the pack Ransler's Folly here, so what you see in the gameplay footage isn't even optimized at all. I mean, I've got 400k here, 450 with the extra attack speed from the bubble, but yeah, that's pretty much it. It's a melee build, so you're gonna post up, use your safe passage, gain that extra damage reduction. You're gonna make sure you put up your bubble, and then you're just gonna spam those twisters, or you can even post up, spam some twisters to suck in the density to be able to reset your slow time, and then cast it, and make sure you're kind of channeling and manually casting in an alternated fashion. That's how I would stack it up. We have, for resource, we have Power of the Storm, we have Astral Presence. For mobility, Illusionist, Teleport of course. We have the Audacity, since this is a melee build, and the Unstable Anomaly for that second life. Stretch Time for the extra attack speed. We are able to use this very efficiently, since it is a melee build. You know, you don't have to set up away from the, you don't have to set up two bubbles basically to attack at range, which is quite nice. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Intensify for the extra arcane debuff here, and I chose to go with Bane of the Powerful simply because it helps to. I found that going Disintegrate with the debuff rune and Powerful was a little bit better than going with Pain Enhancer here. If you go with Pain Enhancer there, you will have troubles with resource, I found, and it basically forces you to go Ray of Frost Cold Blood, which is sort of a trade-off at that point. So I'm just going to stick with Bane of the Powerful. It's an easy gem to acquire in seasons, really quick to get when you go into GRs. It's the first one always. So, and then we also have, for mobility and just getting gold collection ongoing, I've placed Boon of the Hoarder. With Trapped, of course, also another multiplier here. Another ring, if you are able to get it, enhances the build quite a bit, is the Stone of Jordan. Giving that arcane and the elite damage, quite nice in my opinion. If you don't have a lot of pickup radius, you can also opt for the Avarice Band, this being another bounty item. Ring of Royal Grandeur, Act 1 bounties. I think Avarice Band is Act 3, so just keep that in mind if you go for either one of those rings in that slot. Yeah, and it's a pretty efficient build. As far as rolls on gear you're going to want to go for, get attack speed wherever possible. That means you're going to want to look for it on weapon, gloves, both rings. As far as resource, you want at least 2 resource rolls on gear. Either source, you're definitely going to want it on your shoulder piece, and you can either have it on your weapon in place of where I have currently damage percent, or you can have it on your source as I have now. And having at least those 2 in combination with a little bit into Paragon resource reduction and the Topaz in the helmet does work out fairly nicely for helping maintain that resource. Forgot to mention Deflection here, acting as another shielding mechanic, helping to keep you alive. Yeah, pretty nifty build for season start. Thank you for watching this video. As always, drop a like if you liked it. And yeah, DMO isn't the best start for Wizard, but it's a fairly good start, and some fairly powerful builds at the start of season with very low sheet damage, to be honest, are achievable. So hope you enjoy these builds and are able to use them.